I got the text at 2 in the morning while I was perched on a ladder checking a smoke detector circuit in a hotel stairwell, and the message made my stomach drop harder than any late-night fire alarm malfunction ever could. It was from a number I did not recognize, but the preview was enough. Briar Ridge HOA compliance notice, snow removal group chat violation, unauthorized community messaging, respond within 48 hours or face escalation. I work nights as a fire alarm technician, so my phone buzzes at weird hours all the time, but this was different. This was not a service call. This was someone deciding I had broken a rule I did not know existed, and they were coming after me for it. I had moved to St. George, Utah 6 months earlier because the job market was good, and I wanted a place where I could actually afford a house instead of throwing money at rent forever. Briar Ridge was a golf course community where status and appearances ran everything, and I knew that going in, but the price was right, and the neighborhood looked clean. The HOA, Briar Ridge HOA, had a reputation for being strict, but I figured if I kept my lawn neat and my trash cans out of sight, I would be fine. What I did not count on was the welcome committee chair, Paige Rogers, who everyone called Diane because she introduced herself that way at every meeting and every neighborhood event. Diane was maybe 50, always dressed like she was about to chair a corporate board meeting even when she was just checking mailboxes, and she had this way of smiling at you that made it clear she was cataloging every detail for future use. She had shoulder-length straight dark brown hair, a burgundy parka she wore like armor, cream earmuffs, and a reflective safety armband on her left arm that caught streetlights and headlights and made her visible from 3 blocks away in the snow. That armband became a signature. You saw that glint in the dark and you knew Diane was out prowling. The stakes were immediate and personal. My home insurance was up for renewal in 2 months, and my agent had already warned me that any claims or disputes tied to property maintenance could spike my rate or get me dropped entirely. The HOA was pushing me toward a claim by threatening to bill me for common property damage I had not caused, and if I filed to protect myself, I would be the one taking the hit. I could not afford that. I worked nights, slept during the day when I could, and I needed this house to stay stable and affordable. Losing insurance or getting tagged with bogus fees could spiral fast. The group text that triggered the notice had been harmless. A neighbor 2 doors down, a guy named Rich who worked from home and had a snowblower, sent a message to about 8 of us on our cul-de-sac offering to clear the shared sidewalk after the last storm. 3 of us said yes. I sent a thumbs-up emoji and thanks, and that was it. 2 days later, Diane sent the compliance notice to me specifically, claiming I had participated in unauthorized community messaging and that the group chat violated HOA communication policies. I read the covenant docs that night, all 47 pages, and there was nothing about group texts. There was a clause about official HOA communications needing board approval, but that was for the board itself, not residents talking to each other. Diane was twisting the language, and she was doing it on purpose. I called the management company the next morning after I got home from my shift. The rep, a woman named Laura who sounded tired and overworked, told me that Diane had filed a formal complaint and that the compliance notice was standard procedure. I asked what rule I had broken. Laura said she would look into it and get back to me. She never did. Instead, I got a second notice 3 days later, this time claiming that my snow removal activity had damaged common property, specifically the concrete edging along the sidewalk near my driveway. The notice included a photo, but the photo was so blurry and covered in snow that you could not even tell what you were looking at. It could have been my section or anyone else's section. It could have been taken a year ago. There was no timestamp, no context, nothing. Just a vague accusation and a bill for $200 attached as a PDF. I went outside and checked the edging myself. It was fine. No cracks, no chips, no damage at all. I took my own photos, clear ones, with my phone's date stamp visible in the corner. I also checked the edging along the whole cul-de-sac and found 3 other spots where the concrete actually was cracked, none of them near my house. I documented all of it. I sent the photos to Laura with a polite email explaining that the accusation was false and asking for the original complaint to be withdrawn. Laura replied 2 days later saying the matter was under review and that I should attend the next board meeting if I wanted to dispute it in person. The meeting was in 10 days. My contractor, the guy I had hired to fix an ice dam problem on my roof, called me that same afternoon and warned me that the work had to happen before the next freeze cycle or the damage would get worse and the repair cost would double. The freeze was forecast for 8 days out. I had a ticking clock and an HOA trying to bury me in paperwork at the same time. Diane escalated exactly the way I should have expected. She sent an email blast to the entire neighborhood, not just our cul-de-sac, framing me as the problem resident who refused to follow rules and damaged common property. The email did not name me directly, but it described my address, my violation, and my refusal to pay, and everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. I started getting side-eye at the mailbox. One neighbor, an older guy who had always been friendly, crossed the street to avoid me. Another asked me point-blank if I was going to keep causing trouble, or if I planned to just pay the fee and move on. I told him I had not damaged anything, and I was not paying for something I did not do. He shrugged and said it was easier to just go along. That was the culture in Briar Ridge. Keep your head down, pay the fees, do not make waves, and Diane and the board would leave you alone. Fight back, and they would make your life hell. I was not going to just go along. I let her say my name loud, because later I wanted it on the recording. That became my internal mantra. Every email Diane sent, every notice, every public accusation I saved and backed up. I started a folder on my laptop and a physical binder with printouts. I recorded every interaction I could, every voicemail, every meeting. I knew I was holding a trump card, but I was not ready to play it yet. I needed the right moment, and I needed witnesses. The ally I did not expect came from 2 houses down. Her name was Sharon, a retired schoolteacher who had lived in Briar Ridge for 12 years and had seen 3 different HOA boards come and go. Sharon was calm, methodical, and she did not like bullies. She knocked on my door one evening, right after I had gotten home from work and was trying to sleep, and handed me a printed copy of the actual Briar Ridge covenants, the version recorded with the county, not the version the HOA posted on their website. She had highlighted 3 sections. One was the communication policy, which explicitly applied only to official board communications, not resident-to-resident messages. One was the damage claim process, which required photographic evidence with timestamps and a third-party inspection before any fees could be assessed. One was the enforcement procedure, which required a formal hearing and a written finding before any penalty could be imposed. Diane had skipped all of it. Sharon told me she had been watching Diane target new residents for 2 years, always with the same playbook, always with vague accusations and quick fees, and nobody ever fought back because they did not know the rules. Sharon said she would come to the board meeting with me and read the covenants out loud if I needed her to. I said yes. The ice dam contractor called again. He said the forecast had moved up and the freeze cycle was now 6 days out. If I did not get the repair done in the next 72 hours, he could not guarantee the fix would hold, and I might be looking at interior water damage when the thaw hit. I told him to schedule it. He said he needed access to the roof from the driveway, and he would need to park his truck and set up scaffolding for about 6 hours. I said fine. He said he would be there in 2 days. I sent an email to the management company letting them know about the roof work, because the covenants required advance notice for any contractor access. Laura replied with a 1-line acknowledgement. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. The morning the contractor showed up, Diane was in my driveway before he even finished unloading his scaffolding. She was wearing the burgundy parka, the cream earmuffs, and that reflective armband, and she had a clipboard in one hand and her phone in the other. She told the contractor he could not park there because it was a fire lane. The contractor looked at me, looked at her, looked at the street, and said there was no fire lane. Diane said the entire cul-de-sac was a fire lane during winter months due to snow clearance regulations. The contractor asked to see the regulation. Diane said it was in the covenants. I pulled up the covenants on my phone and showed her the parking section. There was nothing about fire lanes. There was nothing about winter parking restrictions. Diane said the rule was part of the county code, not the HOA covenants, and she had already contacted code enforcement. The contractor said he had permits and the work was legal. Diane said she would call a tow truck if he did not move. I told her to go ahead and call. She did. The tow truck arrived 30 minutes later. The driver, a younger guy who looked like he did not want to be there, asked who requested the tow. Diane pointed at the contractor's truck and said it was illegally parked in a fire lane. The driver asked for documentation. Diane handed him a printed sheet that I could not read from where I was standing, but it looked official. The driver looked at it, looked at the street, and said he needed to verify with the county before he could tow. He called someone, had a short conversation, hung up, and told Diane that the county had no record of a fire lane on this street and he could not tow without a police order or a property owner complaint. Diane said she was acting on behalf of the HOA, and the HOA owned the common property. The driver said the driveway was private property and the street was public, and he did not have authority to tow from either without proper documentation. He left. Diane stayed. She took photos of the truck, the scaffolding, my house, and me. She said this is going in the minutes. Then she walked away, that armband flashing in the gray winter light. The contractor got the work done. It took 5 hours. The ice dam repair held. I paid him, thanked him, and he told me to get a lawyer because Diane was clearly escalating and it was not going to stop. I already knew that. What I did not know yet was how far she was willing to go. The board meeting was in 4 days. I had my evidence folder ready, my printed covenants, my photos, my email records, and Sharon had agreed to come with me. I thought I was prepared. Then I got the collections notice. It arrived by certified mail, sent from a third-party collections agency, claiming I owed the HOA $200 for property damage plus $50 for administrative fees plus a late fee of $25, total $275, payable immediately or subject to lien filing. The notice said my account was past due and that the HOA had submitted the debt for collections after I failed to respond to multiple requests for payment. I had never ignored anything. I had disputed the charge, provided evidence, and requested a hearing. None of that mattered. The collections agency did not care about disputes. They just wanted payment. The notice included a deadline, 3 days before the board meeting, clearly timed to force me to either pay under pressure or show up at the meeting already in collections. I called my bank. I pulled my payment history for the HOA. Every monthly dues payment I had ever made had cleared on time. Every single one. I had confirmations, transaction numbers, cleared checks. I asked the bank to generate a formal statement showing the payment history with dates and confirmation codes. They said it would take 2 business days. I said I needed it faster. They said they could expedite it for a fee. I paid the fee. I got the statement the next morning. It showed every payment, every cleared transaction, every confirmation. There was no missed payment. There was no past due balance. The HOA had marked me late anyway. That was my trump card. The bank confirmation showed the HOA had falsified the payment record, and the collections notice proved they had escalated based on false information. I did not tell anyone. I did not send it to Laura. I did not forward it to Diane. I kept it in my folder, printed 3 copies, and waited. Sharon called me the night before the meeting. She said she had been talking to other neighbors quietly, and she had found something. A woman 3 streets over, someone who had moved in 8 months before me, had the same story. Diane had accused her of damaging common property, billed her for repairs, threatened collections, and eventually the woman just paid to make it go away. Sharon had found 2 more. Same pattern. New residents, vague accusations, quick fees, no real evidence, and anyone who fought back got the email blast treatment and the compliance escalation. Sharon said she thought Diane was running a scheme, but she did not have proof. I told her I might. The meeting was held in the clubhouse near the golf course, a beige stucco building with a conference room that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. About 30 people showed up, mostly board members and a few residents who had complaints or questions. Diane was there early, sitting at the front table with the board president and the secretary, wearing the burgundy parka even though the room was warm, the cream earmuffs pushed back on her head, and that reflective armband still on her sleeve. She saw me walk in with Sharon, and her expression shifted, just slightly, from confident to irritated. I sat in the back. Sharon sat next to me with her printed covenants on her lap. The meeting started with routine business, budget updates, landscaping bids, a discussion about holiday decorations. Then they got to compliance issues. Diane stood up and pulled out her clipboard. She ran through a list of violations, minor stuff, a mailbox that needed repainting, a trash can left out past collection day, a lawn that needed mowing. Then she got to me. She said there was an ongoing issue with a resident who had refused to pay for property damage, ignored multiple compliance notices, participated in unauthorized community messaging, and obstructed HOA enforcement by interfering with a tow operation. She said the resident had shown a pattern of non-compliance and disrespect for community standards, and she recommended the board authorize a formal lien filing and additional penalties. She did not say my name, but she did not have to. Everyone in the room knew. I raised my hand. The board president, a retired dentist named Martin who looked like he just wanted the meeting to be over, acknowledged me. I stood up. I said I wanted to respond to the accusation. Diane said the matter was already under review and discussion was not appropriate during the compliance report. Sharon stood up and said the covenants required a hearing before any penalty, and if I was being accused, I had a right to speak. Martin looked uncomfortable. He said I could make a brief statement. I said I had not damaged any property, I had photographic evidence showing the edging near my house was undamaged, and I had documentation showing the accusation was based on a blurry photo with no timestamp or verification. I said I had also never missed a payment, and I had bank records proving it. Diane interrupted and said the payment issue was separate and had been referred to collections. I said that was interesting, because the collections notice claimed I was past due, but my bank statement showed every payment cleared on time. I pulled out the first copy of the statement and held it up. I said I had evidence that the HOA had marked my payments late even though they were not, and I had evidence that the damage claim was false. I said I was happy to share the evidence with the board, but I wanted it on the record. Martin said he would take the evidence under advisement. Diane said the meeting was not the appropriate forum. Sharon stood again and read directly from the printed covenants, the section on enforcement procedures, word for word. She read the part about required hearings, the part about written findings, the part about third-party inspections for damage claims. She read slowly and clearly, and the room got very quiet. When she finished, she said it appeared none of those procedures had been followed, and if that was true, the compliance action was invalid. Martin looked at Diane. Diane said the procedures had been followed internally, and the records were with the management company. I said I had requested those records from Laura and never received them. Martin said he would follow up with the management company and table the issue until the next meeting. Diane said that was unacceptable and the board needed to act immediately to maintain standards. Martin said the meeting was moving on. We moved on, but Diane did not let it go. After the meeting ended, she cornered me in the parking lot. Sharon was still inside talking to another resident. Diane stepped close, too close, and said I was making a mistake. She said fighting the HOA was pointless and expensive, and if I kept pushing I would regret it. She said she had been managing this community for 5 years and she knew how to handle problem residents. She said, "I will make sure your life here is impossible." I looked at her, looked at that reflective armband catching the parking lot lights, and said I was looking forward to the next meeting. She turned and walked to her car, a silver SUV with an HOA parking placard on the dash. I went home, uploaded the meeting audio to my backup drive, and started drafting an email to the County Code Enforcement Office. The side complication hit the next morning. Diane sent me a direct email, copying the board and the management company, claiming my snowblower model was prohibited under HOA equipment restrictions. I had used the snowblower twice, both times to clear my own driveway and the shared sidewalk in front of my house, exactly like half the neighborhood did after every storm. I checked the covenants again. There was no equipment restriction. There was no list of approved or prohibited models. Diane cited a section about noise ordinances and said my snowblower exceeded acceptable decibel levels. I asked for the testing data. She did not reply. I called Laura at the management company. Laura said she was not aware of any equipment restriction and she would check with the board. She never called back. I sent an email to the County Code Enforcement Office asking them to confirm whether the HOA had any authority over snow removal equipment or parking restrictions during winter months. I included my address, the HOA name, and a brief description of Diane's claims. The code enforcement officer, a guy named Mike, replied the same day. He said the county had no fire lane designations on my street, no winter parking restrictions, and no jurisdiction over HOA equipment rules. He said if the HOA was claiming county authority, they were misrepresenting the law, and I should document it and consider filing a complaint with the state HOA regulatory office. I forwarded his email to Laura, to Martin, and to my own records folder. I did not send it to Diane. I wanted to see what she would do next. What she did next was try to isolate me. She sent another email blast, this time framing the board meeting dispute as a disruption caused by a resident who refused to accept responsibility and wasted community time with frivolous challenges. She said the board was considering additional penalties for residents who abused the hearing process. She said maintaining property values required everyone to follow the rules, and exceptions could not be made for people who thought they were special. The email was copied to the entire neighborhood again. I got 3 messages from neighbors within an hour. One said I should just pay the fee and move on. One said I was making the neighborhood look bad. One, from a guy I had never spoken to, said he respected me for standing up and he hoped I won. That one message made the rest of it bearable. Sharon called that night. She said she had been digging through old board meeting minutes posted on the HOA website and she found a pattern. Over the past 3 years, Diane had filed compliance actions against 17 different residents. 12 of them were new move-ins, people who had been in the neighborhood less than a year. 9 of the actions involved damage claims with fees between $100 and $300. Only 2 residents had disputed the claims. Both had eventually paid after the email blast and collections threats. Sharon said she thought Diane was using her position to generate fee revenue and target people who did not know the rules well enough to fight back. She said it was possible the board did not even know, because Diane controlled the compliance reporting and the meeting agendas. I asked Sharon if she would be willing to present that information at the next board meeting. She said yes, but she wanted to talk to some of the other targeted residents first to see if anyone would back her up. The freeze cycle hit 2 days later. The temperature dropped to 15 degrees overnight and stayed there. My roof repair held. The contractor had done good work. But the cold brought a new problem. The HOA sent a community-wide notice saying that due to ice accumulation on common walkways, all residents were required to use only HOA-approved de-icing products. And any damage caused by unauthorized chemicals would be billed to the responsible party. The notice included a link to an approved product list on the HOA website. I clicked the link. It was broken. I emailed Laura asking for the correct link. She sent me a PDF with 3 products listed, all of them commercial brands sold at a single local supplier. I checked the prices. They were double what I would pay at a hardware store for the same chemical compound. I bought the cheaper version and used it on my walkway. 2 days later, Diane was in my driveway again, taking photos of the ice melt granules on my sidewalk. She did not say anything. She just took the photos and left. I knew what was coming. Another compliance notice, another fee, another round of email blasts and threats. I was tired of reacting. I decided to go on offense. I filed a formal records request with the management company under Utah HOA law, asking for copies of all compliance actions filed in the past 3 years. All fee assessments related to property damage, all payment records from my account, and all communications between Diane and the management company Rega regarding my case. The law required a response within 10 business days. Laura acknowledged the request by email but said it would take time to compile. I said the law gave her 10 days, not indefinite time. She did not reply. Sharon came through. She found 4 residents who had been targeted by Diane with the same damage claim pattern, and 3 of them agreed to come to the next board meeting and speak. One of them, a woman named Karen, had kept all her emails and notices, and her story was nearly identical to mine. Vague damage accusation, blurry photo, quick fee, collections threat, email blast, and she had paid $200 to make it stop. She said she regretted it now, and she wanted to help. Sharon also found something else. She had been talking to a neighbor who lived on the street behind mine, a guy named Tom, and Tom said Diane had been walking through his backyard at night, cutting through between streets, even though his property was fully fenced and gated. He had caught her on his doorbell camera twice. He said he had confronted her, and she claimed she was conducting neighborhood safety inspections, but there was no such thing in the covenants. and she had no authority to enter private property. Tom said he had not reported it because he did not want trouble, but if it helped my case, he would share the footage. That was the twist. Diane had been trespassing on multiple properties, and there was a pattern. She was not just filing bogus compliance actions, she was actively surveilling residents, entering private property without permission, and using the information to manufacture violations. Tom agreed to come to the meeting. He brought his laptop with the doorbell footage saved and ready to play. Sharon organized the whole thing. We had 5 residents ready to speak, all with similar stories, all with evidence. We had the printed covenants, the county code enforcement email, my bank statement, and now we had video proof of trespassing. I still had not deployed the trump card publicly, but I had shown enough at the last meeting to put Diane on notice. This time, I was going to finish it. The second board meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday night, 8 days after the first one. The day before the meeting, I got a call from Laura at the management company. She said the regional office had been notified about my records request and they wanted to set up a meeting to discuss my concerns before the board meeting. I said I was happy to meet, but I was still planning to attend the board meeting and present my evidence. Laura said the regional office preferred to handle disputes privately to avoid unnecessary conflict. I said the conflict was already public because Diane had made it public, and I was not going to back down just because the management company was uncomfortable. Laura said she understood and she would pass that along. She also said the regional office was sending a representative to attend the board meeting as an observer. I said that was fine with me. The representative showed up early. His name was Gene, a middle-aged guy in a suit who looked like he had been doing this job for 20 years and had seen every HOA nightmare imaginable. He introduced himself, shook my hand, and said he was there to make sure the meeting followed proper procedure. He did not say whose side he was on, but the fact that he was there at all told me the regional office was worried. Diane saw him walk in, and her face went pale. She tried to approach him before the meeting started, but he waved her off and sat in the back next to me and Sharon. The meeting started the same way as the last one. Routine business, budget updates, landscaping. Then compliance. Diane stood up with her clipboard, but before she could start talking, Martin interrupted her. He said the board had received the records request I filed, and the regional office had advised that all compliance matters related to my case should be tabled pending a full review. Diane said that was inappropriate and undermined the board's authority. Martin said the regional office had final authority over management company procedures and the board was required to cooperate. Diane sat down. She looked furious. The reflective armband on her sleeve caught the fluorescent lights, and I could see her hands shaking. Sharon stood up. She said she wanted to address the board about a pattern of compliance actions that appeared to violate the covenants in state law. Martin hesitated, looked at Jean, and Jean nodded. Martin said Sharon could speak. Sharon laid it out, step by step. She presented the list of 17 compliance actions Diane had filed. The pattern of targeting new residents. The fee assessments with no third-party inspections, the collections threats, the email blasts. She introduced the 4 residents who had been targeted, and each one stood and gave a 2-minute summary of their experience. Karen went first, then a guy named Steve, then a younger woman named Emily, then Tom. Tom played the doorbell footage on his laptop, projected onto the wall with a borrowed screen. The footage showed Diane walking through his backyard at night, checking his fence line, peering into his garage window, all while wearing that same burgundy parka and reflective armband. The timestamp was from 2 weeks earlier, well after dark, and there was no question it was her. The room went silent. Diane tried to respond. She said the footage was taken out of context, and she had been responding to a safety concern reported by another resident. Tom asked which resident. Diane said she could not disclose that due to privacy. Tom said he had checked with his immediate neighbors, and none of them had filed any safety reports. Diane said the matter was under internal review. Jean stood up and said the regional office had not authorized any safety inspections and entering private property without permission was illegal, regardless of HOA authority. He said if Diane had been conducting inspections, she had done so without proper authorization, and the management company would be investigating. Diane said this is going in the minutes. Jean said the minutes were going to reflect a formal complaint and a referral to legal counsel. That was when I deployed the trump card. I stood up and said I had additional evidence related to the payment dispute. I pulled out the 3 copies of the bank statement I had prepared, the ones showing every cleared transaction with confirmation codes. I handed the first copy to Sharon, because I wanted my ally to have it first and I wanted us to present together so Diane could not isolate me. Sharon looked at it, nodded, and stood next to me. I handed the second copy to Martin and the third to Jean. I said the bank statement proved that every payment I had made to the HOA had cleared on time, and the collections notice claiming I was past due was based on false records. I said the HOA had either made an error or deliberately falsified the payment record, and either way the collections action was invalid and the late fees were fraudulent. I said I wanted the collections notice withdrawn, the fees reversed, and a formal apology on the record. Jean looked at the statement, looked at Diane, and asked if the management company had verified the payment records before submitting the account to collections. Diane said payment verification was handled by the accounting department and she did not have access to those records. Jean said that was not an answer. He asked Laura, who was sitting near the front, if she had verified the payments. Laura said she had submitted the account based on the information provided by the compliance committee, which was chaired by Diane. Jean asked Diane directly if she had checked the payment records before filing the damage claim and the collections referral. Diane said the resident had ignored multiple notices and failed to respond. I said I had responded to every notice, disputed the charges, provided evidence, and requested a hearing, and I had emails proving all of it. Jean said the meeting was over and the board needed to recess immediately for an executive session. Martin agreed. The meeting ended. Diane tried to leave. Jean stopped her at the door and said she needed to stay for the executive session because the regional office had questions. Diane said she had another commitment. Jean said the commitment could wait. Diane stayed. Sharon, Tom, and the other residents left. I stayed in the parking lot with my truck running, heat on, waiting to see what would happen. 20 minutes later, Jean came out and knocked on my window. He said the regional office was taking over the compliance matter, the collections notice was being withdrawn, and Diane was being removed from the compliance committee pending a full investigation. He said I would receive a formal letter within 3 business days confirming the resolution and outlining next steps. He also said the management company would be conducting a review of all compliance actions Diane had filed in the past 3 years, and if other residents had been wrongly charged, the fees would be reversed. He apologized on behalf of the company and said this should never have happened. I thanked him and asked what would happen to Diane. He said that was an internal personnel matter and he could not discuss it, but he made it clear she would not be in a position to target residents anymore. I thought that was the end. It was not. 3 days later, I got a call from a detective with the St. George Police Department. He said Tom had filed a trespassing complaint and provided the doorbell footage, and they were investigating. He said they had also received complaints from 2 other residents in the neighborhood reporting similar incidents, and they wanted to interview me about my interactions with Diane. I told him everything. The compliance notices, the damage claims, the tow truck incident, the photos she had taken in my driveway, the email blasts, the threats. He took notes, asked for copies of my evidence, and said they were building a case. He said trespassing was a misdemeanor, but if there was a pattern of harassment or stalking, the charges could escalate. He said I should contact him immediately if Diane approached me again or tried to retaliate. She did not approach me, but she did not go quietly, either. 2 days after the detective called, I got a text from Sharon saying Diane had resigned from the HOA board and the welcome committee, effective immediately. The resignation letter, which Sharon forwarded to me, was short and bitter. Diane claimed she had been unfairly targeted by a small group of disruptive residents who refused to follow community standards, and she could no longer serve in an environment where her authority was constantly undermined. She said the neighborhood would regret losing her leadership and the board would struggle to maintain order without her experience. She did not apologize. She did not acknowledge any wrongdoing. She just walked away, leaving the mess behind for someone else to clean up. The management company regional office kept its word. I received the formal letter withdrawing the collections notice, reversing the damage fees, and confirming that my payment record was clear. The letter also included an apology and a commitment to review all compliance procedures to prevent future errors. Gene followed up with a phone call saying the review had identified 8 other residents who had been wrongly charged, and all fees were being reversed with interest. He said the company was implementing new oversight procedures for compliance actions, including mandatory third-party inspections for damage claims and board approval for any collections referrals. He said Diane would not be working with the HOA in any capacity going forward, and if I had any further issues, I should contact him directly. The criminal case moved slower. The detective called me a month later and said they had interviewed Diane and she had admitted to entering private property, but claimed she was conducting safety inspections authorized by the HOA. The detective said the HOA had provided a written statement confirming no such inspections were authorized and Diane had no legal authority to enter private property. He said the district attorney was reviewing the case and deciding whether to file charges. He said it would likely be a plea deal for a misdemeanor trespassing charge with probation and a stay-away order, but it depended on whether Diane had a prior record and whether the DA thought the case was worth pursuing. He said I would be notified if charges were filed. I never heard back from the detective after that. I assumed the case was resolved quietly, either with a plea or a dismissal. I did not follow up. I was done. The HOA conflict was over, my record was clear, my fees were reversed, and Diane was gone. That was enough. The neighborhood changed after that. The new compliance committee chair was a retired engineer named Bob who actually read the covenants before filing any actions, and the board started posting meeting agendas and minutes online so residents could see what was happening. The email blasts stopped. The vague accusations stopped. People started talking to each other again instead of hiding behind curtains and avoiding eye contact at the mailbox. Sharon became the unofficial neighborhood historian, keeping track of board decisions and making sure new residents knew their rights. Tom kept his doorbell camera running and joked that he was the neighborhood watch captain now. I kept working nights, fixing fire alarms, and sleeping during the day when I could. My home insurance renewed without incident. My roof repair held through the rest of winter. Life in Briar Ridge went back to normal, or at least as normal as an HOA neighborhood could ever be. But I never forgot the trump card moment. The look on Diane's face when I handed those bank statements to Sharon first, when Jean asked her directly if she had verified the payment records, when the whole room realized she had been caught in a lie she could not talk her way out of. That moment made everything worth it. The late-night emails, the parking lot confrontation, the collections threats, the fear that I might lose my house or my insurance or my reputation in a neighborhood I had just moved to. All of it led to that one moment when the power flipped, when the bully lost control, and when the people who had been quiet for years finally saw that fighting back was possible. I still see that reflective armband sometimes in my memory, flashing in the dark, a warning signal that Diane was out there prowling, looking for the next target, the next new resident who did not know the rules and would not fight back. But the armband is gone now. Diane is gone. And the neighborhood is better for it. The final piece of the story came 6 months later, long after the drama had faded and most people had moved on. I got a letter in the mail from a law firm in Salt Lake City. It was addressed to me and about 20 other Briar Ridge residents, and it said the firm was representing a class action lawsuit against the previous management company and Diane personally, alleging fraud, harassment, and illegal fee assessments. The letter said the firm had been contacted by multiple former residents who had been targeted by Diane and had paid fees under duress, and they were seeking damages and a court order preventing Diane from serving in any HOA leadership role in the state. The letter asked if I wanted to join the lawsuit. I thought about it for a day and decided not to. I had already won my fight. I had my fees back, my record clear, and my peace of mind. I did not need money or revenge. I just needed to be done. But I did send the law firm copies of all my evidence, the emails, the notices, the bank statements, the county code enforcement letter, the meeting audio recordings, everything. I figured if other people were still fighting, they deserved every weapon I could give them. The lawyer called me a week later and said my evidence was the most complete documentation they had seen and it would be central to the case. He said the lawsuit was moving forward and he would keep me updated. I thanked him and wished him luck. I never followed the lawsuit after that. I assume it settled or went to trial or got dismissed, but I do not know. I was done looking backward. The HOA conflict had taken enough of my time and energy, and I was ready to move forward. I had a job to do, a house to maintain, and a neighborhood that was finally starting to feel like home. The last time I saw Diane was about a year after everything ended. I was driving home from a night shift, early morning, sun just starting to come up, and I saw her walking on the sidewalk 2 blocks from Briar Ridge. She was wearing a different coat, dark blue instead of burgundy, no earmuffs, no reflective armband. She looked smaller somehow, less certain, like the uniform had been the thing holding her together, and without it she was just another middle-aged woman walking alone in the cold. She did not see me. I drove past and did not look back. I still live in Briar Ridge. The HOA still sends notices and holds meetings and argues about landscaping and holiday decorations, because that is what HOAs do. But the culture is different now. People know they can push back. They know the rules actually matter and the board can not just make things up. They know that if someone like Diane tries to take control again, there will be residents like Sharon and Tom and me who will stand up and fight. That knowledge changes everything. I learned a lot from that fight. I learned that bullies rely on fear and ignorance, and the moment you take those away, they have nothing left. I learned that evidence is everything, and if you document every interaction and save every email, you can turn a he said, she said argument into a clear, factual record that no one can dispute. I learned that allies matter, and people like Sharon who have been around long enough to see the patterns are worth their weight in gold. I learned that patience is a weapon, and sometimes the best move is to hold your trump card until the perfect moment instead of playing it too early and giving the other side time to regroup. Most of all, I learned that you do not have to accept being pushed around just because someone has a title and a clipboard and a reflective armband that makes them look official. Authority has limits, and when someone oversteps those limits, you have every right to call them out and make them prove their case. The system is not rigged unless you let it be rigged. The rules are not fake unless you treat them like they are fake. And the people in charge are not untouchable unless you decide they are untouchable. Diane thought she was untouchable. She thought she could target new residents, file bogus claims, threaten collections, send email blasts, and trespass on private property, and no one would ever push back hard enough to matter. She was wrong. And the moment she realized she was wrong, the moment Jean asked her to verify the payment records and she had no answer, the moment the doorbell footage played on the wall and the whole room saw her walking through Tom's backyard in the dark, that was the moment the power shifted and everything changed. I am glad I fought. I am glad I kept the evidence. I am glad Sharon and Tom and the others stood with me. I am glad the regional office stepped in and the management company fixed the process. I am glad the criminal case happened, even if I do not know how it ended. I am glad the lawsuit gave other people a chance to get their money back and hold Diane accountable. But mostly, I am glad I trusted my gut when I got that first compliance notice at 2 a.m. and knew something was wrong. I could have paid the $200 and moved on. I could have ignored the group text and the email blasts and the tow truck and the collections notice. I could have kept my head down and hoped Diane would leave me alone. A lot of people did exactly that, and I do not blame them. Fighting an HOA is exhausting and expensive and risky, and most people just want to live their lives without extra drama. But I could not do that. I knew the accusation was false. I knew the process was rigged. I knew Diane was lying, and I knew if I did not fight back she would keep doing it to other people. So I fought. And I won. And now, when I see new residents moving into Briar Ridge, I make a point to introduce myself and let them know that if they ever get a compliance notice that does not make sense, they should come talk to me or Sharon or Bob, because the rules are real and the process matters and no one has to fight alone. That is the legacy of the Diane fight. Not the fees reversed, or the lawsuit or the resignation letter. The legacy is the knowledge, shared resident to resident, that you can stand up and win. That the system can work if you make it work. That bullies lose when people stop being afraid. The winter after the fight was different. I cleared my driveway and the shared sidewalk with the same snowblower Diane had tried to ban, and no one said a word. I used the cheap ice melt from the hardware store, and no one took photos. I parked my truck in the same spot the contractor had used, and no one called a tow company. I got my mail from the cluster box and smiled at neighbors, and they smiled back, and there was no tension, no fear, no wondering if someone was watching and cataloging every move. The golf course stayed beautiful under the snow. The neighborhood stayed quiet and clean. The HOA kept doing its job, but it did the job the right way, following the rules, respecting the process, treating residents like people instead of targets. And I kept working nights, fixing fire alarms, coming home in the early morning when the streets were empty and the snow was fresh, and feeling like I had finally found a place where I could breathe. I do not think about Diane much anymore. When I do not feel angry or bitter. I just feel tired, the way you feel after a long fight that should never have happened in the first place. I hope she learned something. I hope she found a different way to use her energy. Something that did not involve trespassing and lying and making people's lives harder for no good reason. But I do not know if she did, and honestly, I do not care. She is not my problem anymore. She is not anyone's problem in Briar Ridge. And that is all that matters. The best moment of the whole aftermath came about 3 months later. I was checking my mail one evening after work, and a young couple was moving into the house 2 doors down. The same house where the woman who paid Diane's bogus fee used to live. They looked nervous, unloading boxes in the cold, trying to figure out where everything went. I walked over and introduced myself. I told them welcome to the neighborhood, and if they ever had questions about the HOA or needed help with anything, I was happy to talk. The guy asked if the HOA was strict. I said it used to be, but it was better now, and if they ever got a compliance notice, they should read the covenants first and ask questions before paying any fees. I gave him my number. He thanked me and said he appreciated it. His wife smiled and said they had heard stories about HOA drama and they were worried. I said the drama was over and the neighborhood was a good place to live now, and they were going to be fine. That moment felt like closure. Not because I had beaten Diane or won the fight or gotten my fees back, but because I had broken the cycle. The next new resident who moved in did not have to go through what I went through. They did not have to fight alone. They did not have to wonder if the rules were real or if the HOA was just making things up. They had a neighbor who would tell them the truth and back them up if trouble started. That was the real victory. Sharon retired from active HOA involvement a year later. She had done her time, fought her fights, and she was ready to let someone else take over. Bob stepped up as the new compliance chair and brought a level of professionalism and fairness that had been missing for years. Tom kept his doorbell camera running and joked that he had enough footage to make a documentary. The other residents who had been targeted by Diane got their fees back and moved on with their lives. The lawsuit settled for an undisclosed amount, and the law firm sent me a thank you letter saying my evidence had been critical to the outcome. I filed the letter in my binder and closed the book. I still have the binder. It sits on a shelf in my office, a 3-inch black binder with printed emails and notices and bank statements and photos, all organized by date and labeled with sticky tabs. I have not opened it in over a year. I probably never will again. But I keep it because it reminds me that documentation matters, that evidence is power, and that when someone tries to push you around, the best response is to stay calm, gather proof, and wait for the right moment to strike back. The reflective armband is gone. The burgundy parka is gone. The compliance notices and the email blasts and the collections threats are gone. Diane is gone. And Briar Ridge is finally the neighborhood it was supposed to be. A place where people follow reasonable rules, treat each other with respect, and do not have to live in fear of the next bogus fee or the next late-night surveillance walk or the next tow truck showing up in the driveway. I got what I wanted when I moved here. A house I could afford, a neighborhood that was clean and safe, and a chance to build a stable life without constant chaos. It took a fight to get there, a fight I did not want and did not start, but a fight I am glad I finished. Because now I have all of that, and I have something else too. I have the knowledge that when the system is rigged, you can unrig it. When the bully is in charge, you can take the power back. And when someone tells you to just pay the fee and move on, you can say no, gather your evidence, find your allies, and make them prove their case. That is the story. That is the fight. That is how one fire alarm technician in St. George, Utah, took on an HOA Karen who thought she was untouchable. And won. The winter sun is out today. The snow is melting on the roofs and dripping into the gutters. The sidewalks are clear. The streets are quiet. The golf course is starting to show patches of green where the snow is pulled back. Spring is coming, and with it, a new season in Briar Ridge, a season without Diane, without fear, without the constant low-level dread that comes from living under someone who sees enforcement as a weapon instead of a responsibility. I am sitting in my truck in the driveway, heat running, coffee in hand, looking at the neighborhood in the morning light. The houses are tidy. The mailboxes are straight. The lawns are dormant but healthy. Everything looks normal, peaceful, exactly the way a suburban HOA neighborhood is supposed to look. But I know what is underneath that surface. I know the covenants that govern this place. I know the procedures that are supposed to protect residents. I know the people who fought to make those procedures matter. And I know that if someone tries to take control the way Diane did, there are enough of us now who will stand up and say no. That is the real win. Not the fees, not the resignation, not the lawsuit. The real win is the culture change. The shift from fear to confidence. From isolation to solidarity. From accepting abuse to demanding accountability. That shift does not happen by accident. It happens because people decide to fight, document, organize, and hold the line even when it is hard and scary and uncertain. I finish my coffee, put the truck in reverse, and head to work. Another night shift, another round of fire alarms to test and repair. The work is steady, the pay is good, and the job is something I am good at. But the thing I am most proud of is not the work. It is this. The fight I won. The neighborhood I helped fix. The binder on the shelf that proves you can stand up to a bully and win if you are willing to do the work. Diane tried to make my life impossible. She failed. And now, every time I pull into my driveway and see the cleared sidewalk and the quiet street and the neighbors who wave instead of hiding, I know that failure is permanent. She is not coming back. The fear is not coming back. The cycle is broken. And that is enough. The management company kept its promise about the process reforms. Every compliance action now requires a board vote, a written finding, and photographic evidence with timestamps. Damage claims require a third-party inspection before any fees can be assessed. Collections referrals require board approval and verification of payment records. Residents get 30 days to dispute any charge, and disputes trigger an automatic hearing with the option to bring witnesses and evidence. The changes are not perfect, but they are real, and they work. Bob enforces the rules fairly. When someone leaves their trash cans out too long, he sends a friendly reminder. When someone actually damages common property, he gets an estimate, shares it with the resident, and works out a payment plan if needed. When there is a dispute, he listens to both sides and checks the covenants before making a decision. It is boring, procedural, and exactly the way an HOA is supposed to work. The neighborhood gossip has shifted. Instead of whispered complaints about compliance notices and fees, people talk about landscaping projects and school districts and restaurant recommendations. The group texts are back, and no one is afraid to use them. Rich still offers to clear the shared sidewalk after storms, and people say yes without worrying about unauthorized messaging violations. The culture is normal again, or maybe normal for the first time. I ran into Martin, the board president at the grocery store, a few months ago. He thanked me for pushing back against Diane and said the board had been uncomfortable with her tactics for a while but did not know how to address it without proof. He said my documentation and Sharon's research gave them the cover they needed to make changes, and the neighborhood was better for it. I thanked him for listening and said I hoped the reforms would stick. He said they would, because the regional office was watching and the residents were paying attention, and no one wanted to go through that kind of drama again. The county code enforcement officer, Mike, sent me a follow-up email about 6 months after the initial complaint. He said the HOA had stopped citing county authority for rules that did not exist, and his office had not received any new complaints from Briar Ridge residents. He said if I ever had issues again, I should reach out, but he did not expect to hear from me. He was right. I have not had a single compliance issue since Diane left. My account is clear, my payments are on time, and the HOA leaves me alone as long as I follow the actual rules. The ice dam repair held through 2 more winters. The contractor was right about the freeze cycle timing. If I had waited, the damage would have spread and the cost would have doubled. The decision to go ahead with the work despite Diane's interference was the right call, and it saved me thousands of dollars in the long run. My home insurance renewed without incident, no claims, no disputes, no rate increases tied to HOA drama. The stability I was fighting for became real. I think about the moment in the management company lobby sometimes, the moment the title of this story is built on. It was not the board meeting. It was not the email blast. It was the day I walked into the management company office to demand a copy of the winter enforcement policy on camera. And Diane was already there arguing with Laura about something else. And a neighbor named Jessica walked in behind me and said out loud, in front of everyone, that Diane had been caught on her security camera trespassing in her backyard 3 times in the past month, and there was a pattern, and she was filing a police report. Diane turned beet red, started shouting that Jessica was lying, and Laura tried to calm everyone down. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Diane lunged toward me, trying to grab the phone, and Laura stepped between us. That was when the police arrived, because Jessica had already called them before walking into the office, and she had the footage queued up on her phone ready to show. The police officer, a calm older guy who looked like he had seen every possible neighborhood dispute, asked everyone to step outside. We did. He took statements from me, Jessica, and Laura. He asked to see the footage. Jessica showed him. He asked Diane if she had been on Jessica's property. Diane said she was conducting safety inspections. He asked if she had permission. She said she did not need permission because she was HOA leadership. He said that was not how property law worked, and entering private property without permission was trespassing regardless of her title. He asked if she had entered other properties. She hesitated. He asked again. She said she had entered multiple properties as part of her compliance duties. He asked for a list. She refused. He said he was writing a report and the county attorney would review it for potential charges. Diane said this is going in the minutes. The officer said the minutes did not matter, and she should contact a lawyer. That was the moment everything broke open. The moment Diane could not control the narrative anymore, could not isolate individual residents, could not hide behind email blasts and compliance notices. The moment the police became involved and the trespassing became a criminal matter, not just an HOA dispute. The moment the pattern Jessica described, the same pattern Sharon had been documenting, became undeniable public record. And the moment I realized I had won, not because I had out-argued Diane or outmaneuvered her procedurally, but because I had built a coalition of residents who refused to stay quiet. And when we all spoke up at once, the system had no choice but to respond. Jessica became part of the group after that. She joined the next board meeting, shared her footage, and filed a formal complaint with the management company. 3 other residents came forward with similar stories. The regional office launched a full investigation. Diane resigned a week later. The police report was filed. The county attorney reviewed it and offered a plea deal. I do not know if Diane took it, but I know she never came back to Briar Ridge, and that was enough. The lobby confrontation was messy and chaotic and not at all the clean courtroom victory you see in movies, but it was real, and it worked. The police showing up was not planned by me, but it was the logical result of Diane's pattern finally catching up with her. The recording I made was shaky and the audio was muffled, but it captured the moment Diane admitted to entering multiple properties, and that admission became part of the police report. The whole thing was over in 15 minutes, but those 15 minutes changed everything. That is how real fights end, not with a dramatic speech or a jury verdict, but with a chaotic confrontation in a beige-walled office lobby where everyone is shouting, and the police are called, and the person who thought they were untouchable suddenly realizes they are not. The power does not shift because of one perfect move. It shifts because of 100 small moves, 100 pieces of evidence, 100 moments of standing up and refusing to back down, until the weight of it all becomes too much for the other side to carry. Diane carried that weight for years. She targeted residents, filed bogus claims, trespassed on private property, lied about payment records, and got away with it because no one fought back hard enough to matter. But then, I fought back. Sharon fought back. Tom fought back. Jessica fought back. And when we all fought together, the weight became too much, and Diane collapsed under it. I do not feel sorry for her. I feel relief that she is gone and the neighborhood is safe again. I feel pride that I stood up when it mattered. I feel gratitude for the people who stood with me. And I feel hope that the next person who tries to abuse power in Briar Ridge will face the same coalition, the same resistance, the same inevitable collapse. The sun is setting now. The snow is turning pink in the fading light. The golf course is quiet. The streets are empty. The neighborhood is at peace. And I am going to bed. Because I have another night shift in a few hours, another round of fire alarms to test, another paycheck to earn, another day of living the stable, quiet life I fought so hard to protect. Diane thought she could take that away from me. She thought she could bully me into paying fees I did not owe, accepting accusations that were false, and living in fear of the next compliance notice. She was wrong. And now she is gone. And I am still here. And the neighborhood is better, because I refused to give up. That is the story. That is the fight. That is the win. And that is why I keep the binder on the shelf, as a reminder that sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to stand up, gather proof, find allies, and fight like your home depends on it. Because it does.